In April 1941, the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia took place, and after that, Yugoslavia was partitioned by them. Exactly how did this invasion take place? And did you know that apart from the Germans, also the Italians and the Hungarians did take part in it? Which battles did take place? How many people were killed? Well, that and more you're gonna find out in a forgotten World War II invasion episode where I'm gonna talk about the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia in April 1941. Keep watching. Hey, good to have you back on the channel. If you happen to be new, my name is Stevan, I'm a Dutch history teacher and I'm covering history on location here on high altitude for you. And if you find it interesting and you have not subscribed yet, well, do so and also hit that notification bell. And if you want to support me, you can do so via PayPal and Patreon. The links are in the description. By the eve of the Second World War, Yugoslavia was far from a stable state. It was created after the First World War under its initial name, Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes. That was till 1929, because then the King Alexander I abolished the constitution and the country became a royal dictatorship. This was in response to the assassination of the politician Stevan Radic in parliament. Alexander himself was assassinated in 1934 when visiting France. His son Peter was too young to rule, so Alexander's first cousin Paul became the Prince Regent of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was in a precarious situation when 1941 came around. Britain and the US urged Yugoslavia not to sign an allegiance with Germany, but looking at Yugoslavia's position, things weren't looking favorable if it wanted to resist Germany. And thus, on the 25th of March, Yugoslavia signed the Triparte Pact to join the Axis powers. See, Hitler wanted to use the country's rail network to capture Greece. Then, on the 27th of March, Serbian military leaders seized power in a military coup in Belgrade. They denounced Paul and put the 17-year-old Peter on the throne. Hitler then vowed to destroy Yugoslavia. The Yugoslav Supreme Commander was also one of the ringleaders in the military coup, Dusan Timovic. Yugoslavia's latest plan of defense anticipated defense on all borders, in an offense in Italian-held Albania to link up with Greek forces. Yugoslav troops from the north would gradually be withdrawn towards Greece. There was a plan to abandon 90% of the national territory and retreat into the mountains around Sarajevo, but there wasn't much enthusiasm for that. The Yugoslav army should not be underestimated, since it had 17 active and 12 infantry divisions plus 3 cavalry divisions and a number of brigades. When the Axis invaded, the Yugoslav army, however, was still preparing. There were 250,000 men under arms at the beginning of March, and another 500,000 were called up for the 27th of March. But no more than 30% of them had answered the call up within the prescribed time. Many did not report or deserted outright. For example, Croats and Slovenes, they felt that this was not a state worth fighting for. And also communist propaganda caused this, because at the time the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia kicked off, Germany and the USSR were still in a non-aggression pact. At the moment of the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia, many Yugoslav units were still crisscrossing through the country and were in short supply. And also, the Yugoslav Air Force had just a few modern planes. In other words, even before the invasion started, the situation was dire. And on April 6th, Orthodox Eastern Sunday, the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia, also known as Operation 25 or Operation Punishment, started. It kicked off with a massive aerial bombing the city of Belgrade, the capital of Yugoslavia. Large parts of the city were destroyed and thousands of lives were lost, both military and civilian. As a result of this, communications broke down and this caused chaos in the Yugoslav ranks. As historian Citino puts it, it is no exaggeration to say that Operation Punishment had won the Yugoslav campaign in the first 20 minutes. Serb, Croat and Slovene pilots took part in brave action in the defense of Belgrade, but the Yugoslav Air Force was severely hit by German attacks on their airfields. The main German thrust came from Bulgaria. The idea was that these troops had to link up with Italian forces that came from Italian-held Albania. With that attack, a Yugoslav retreat into Greece was made impossible. After some fighting, Niš was captured. The South Yugoslav city of Skopje fell in German hands on the second day. Part of the German forces went further into Greece. Yugoslav defenses in the south did hold for a few days. According to the Yugoslav defense plan, their troops marched into Italian-held Albania. They marched on Skutari. Shortly after, their advance was halted and turned to defense on the 14th of April. The German attack from the north was more rapid as it was aided by sabotage from Croat and ethnic German collaborators. On the 10th of April, the Germans entered the Croatian capital of Zagreb and took 15,000 POWs, among them 22 generals. The Croats greeted the Germans as liberators from Serbian oppression. That day, the Independent State of Croatia was declared. The point of main efforts, the so-called Schwerpunkt, included 3 mechanized columns driving on the capital of Belgrade. As the Yugoslav army was crumbling, General Simovic sent out orders to his army groups to fight the enemy wherever you may be in contact with him in all directions on your own initiative without awaiting special orders from higher command echelons. The situation was extremely dire. The Yugoslav lines had been penetrated severely, and the only thing the defenders could do was fighting pitched battles as they retreated. Croats and Slovenes, they deserted by the masses, and others hurled back in confusion and chaos. The situation was truly hopeless. On April 13, the Supreme Commander Simonovic resigned to make way for General Danilo Kalafatovic, who he instructed to negotiate a ceasefire. That day, Belgrade fell. Simonovic then flew out to Greece to join King Peter, who had already left. However, the Germans did most of the work. Also, the Italians did take part in this invasion, and they advanced here. See, Mussolini was keen on taking the parts of Western Yugoslavia as well as the Dalmatian coast, and the Italians advanced practically without much fighting. And they crossed the Rupnik line, and this here is one of the defenses of the Rupnik line. Today it is located in the middle of Slovenia and to the east of Istria, but back then the Italo-Yugoslav border was located further to the east, so that explains the location of this line. And the Hungarians, they marched in via the north towards Novi Sad. In order to prevent Yugoslav troops consolidating their positions in the Bosnian mountains, 2 German attacks on Sarajevo were undertaken from opposite direction. On the 15th of April, Sarajevo fell in German hands. An armistice was signed on the 17th of April. The campaign had lasted 12 days. Between 200 and 300,000 prisoners of war, 12,000 officers and over 200 generals, mostly Serbs, were taken to camps in Germany and Italy. The German forces had suffered 558 casualties and the Italians 3,500. The Hungarians had around 350 casualties, dead and wounded, and I read that the interned Yugoslav soldiers who were Jewish did survive the war. With minimal losses, the Axis powers had taken down the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. A German officer, he recalled that it was more of a military parade rather than a proper invasion. The attack on Yugoslavia was carried out simultaneously via different directions. The Yugoslav army had not the slightest chance to survive this onslaught. A part of the attack that came from multiple directions, the units were still in transit and much of the equipment and supplies was lacking. Also, the Croats and the Slovenes deserted by the masses since they believed the Yugoslav state was not worth dying for. A Croat state was already proclaimed on April 10th. And so, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia fell within 12 days. The battle for Greece lasted longer, and that is something I hope to one day cover in another video, hopefully on location as well. If you want to support me, please go to my Patreon page. You can also support me via PayPal. You see my patrons right here. Thank you so much for your support. And if you'd like to know more about Yugoslav history, click right here. See you later.